She received $300,000, and instead of bringing them home, she ran straight to the dealership to show off her brand-new Porsche 911. That image will never leave me. Sarah gripping the steering wheel, her hair flying in the wind, smiling like she had just conquered the world. But for me, it was not a moment of pride. It was the exact moment I realized we were losing her. Those dollars, meant as a bridge back to her family, as a gesture of repair, became instead a weapon of distance. Money that should have been a symbol of reconciliation turned into the foundation of her downfall. My name is Jonathan. I am her father. And if you have a daughter of your own, maybe you will understand the pain of what I am about to tell you. It's the story of how Sarah, our bright, kind, deeply loved child, went from being the light of our household to a stranger exiled from her own family. And it all began years before that Porsche, with innocence, laughter, and the kind of bond you think nothing could ever destroy. We lived in Denver, Colorado. I earned my living in construction, long days on scaffolding, heavy bricks and concrete, boots filled with dust by nightfall. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest. My muscles ached most nights, but I was proud that every wall I built and every house I helped raise meant my family could eat, could sleep warm, could dream. My wife, Margaret, was a homemaker. She gave her entire heart to the household, cooking, cleaning, teaching Sarah values, patching my torn shirts, saving every penny we had. She believed in home the way I believed in work. Sarah was our miracle. From the moment she opened her eyes, we felt the world had given us a gift. As a child, she was full of curiosity. She would sit on the floor surrounded by books while Margaret cooked, asking questions faster than we could answer. She loved to help me in the yard, holding the tape measure like it was the most important job in the world. Her kindness stood out. At school, she was the girl who noticed who had no lunch and split hers in half. Next door lived Michael and his family. His parents, the Harrisons, were as close to us as kin. Christmases were always together. Margaret baking pies, Mrs. Harrison bringing her famous green bean casserole, the kids unwrapping presents under one roof as if we were one big family. Summer evenings we grilled in the backyard, kids running through sprinklers, adults laughing over lemonade. Sarah and Michael grew up inseparable. They rode their bikes down the same streets, studied in the same classrooms, dreamed under the same Colorado sky. I remember once, when Sarah was 12, she fell off her bike and scraped her knee badly. Before Margaret or I could get to her, Michael had already helped her up, wiping her tears with his shirt. He couldn't have been more than 13, but I saw in him something steady even then.
I always knew, Margaret often said, smiling at the memory. The way he carried her school bag, the way she leaned on him, the way she lit up when you walked into the room, it wasn't just childhood friendship. It was the beginning of something deeper.
Through high school, they grew together. Michael was never the loudest, never the show-off. He was the steady hand, the kind boy who walked Sarah home even when it meant going out his way. In college, they chose the same campus, studied in the same library, ate lunch together under the same oak tree. By then, no one doubted where their story was headed. When Michael proposed, it felt like a circle completing itself. He came to me first, nervous but determined. I could see the sincerity in his eyes when he asked for my blessing. "Jonathan," he said, "I've loved her since I can remember. I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'll take care of her." My throat tightened, and though I tried to be stern, my voice cracked when I said yes. Their wedding was more than just an event. It was a celebration of decades, of two families who had grown together, who had shared hardships and joys, who had prayed for this moment long before it arrived. The cost shocked me at first. $300,000. To me, a construction worker, that number was unimaginable. But Margaret explained, and Michael's parents insisted, that this was once in a lifetime, that for Sarah and Michael, the day should shine brighter than any other. And it did. I stood there as Sarah walked down the aisle, white gown flowing like something out of a dream, and Michael waited at the altar, tears streaming freely. Margaret's hand gripped mine so tightly I thought she might break it. She was crying too, but with joy. I've never felt such a swell of pride. Michael was not wealthy, not glamorous. He worked as a manager at UPG Delivery. A good, steady job, the kind that kept lights on and future secure. He was the kind of man who woke up before dawn, did his duty with discipline, and came home each night ready to care for his wife. Dependable, respectful, everything a father could wish for his daughter. I thought Sarah understood that. I thought she saw the value in it. I thought the love they had grown from childhood would shield them from anything. For years, I let myself believe their story would be one of those rare ones you tell with pride. Neighbors who fell in love, who married, who built a future on the foundation of trust and history. But stories turn. Sometimes sharply, sometimes when you least expect it. And for us, that turn began the day another man stepped into Sarah's life.
Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which city you are from.
I used to believe temptation belonged only to strangers, to faraway places, to stories you read in books. I never thought I could creep into the ordinary streets of Denver, into a life as simple and steady as my daughter's. But temptation has a way of finding cracks, and once it does, it grows like weeds through concrete. It began when Sarah started attending professional events through Michael's work. He often encouraged her to come along, proud to show her to his colleagues at UPG Delivery. Michael wasn't the type to climb ladders quickly. He valued stability more than ambition. But in those rooms filled with polished suits and firm handshakes, Sarah's eyes caught something new. That's where she met him, Daniel. Daniel was older, 10 years Sarah's senior, a broker at Americanex in downtown Denver. From the very first evening, he stood out. Perfect suit, perfect smile, the kind of man who shook hands with confidence that filled the air like perfume. He spoke quickly, with clever words and sharp wit, the kind of person who always knew how to make others lean in closer. I heard about him at first in small mentions. Sarah would drop his name casually. Daniel said this, or Daniel thinks that. Michael, simple-hearted as he was, never saw the shadow behind those words. He trusted her, trusted their bond, the history they shared. To him, Daniel was just another face in a crowded room. But I saw it. A father knows.
I remember when she first brought up his name, Margaret whispered to me one night while we washed dishes. Her tone, it was lighter, almost playful. She didn't realize it, but I did. Something was already pulling at her.
Daniel knew exactly what he was doing. He was a man who thrived on winning. Not just in markets, not just in deals, but in lives. To him, Sarah wasn't a person to be cherished, but a prize to be claimed. His confidence, his wealth, his smooth words, they were a net he cast wide, and Sarah was caught before she realized she was swimming in dangerous waters. Michael continued to work long hours. He wasn't absent out of neglect. He was building a life for them. But while he poured himself into duty, Daniel poured himself into charm. He offered Sarah something Michael could not. The illusion of a world without limits. Expensive dinners in Denver's finest restaurants. Drives in sleek cars. Promises of trips to places she'd only seen in magazines. I remember one night when Sarah came home late. Michael had left her dinner in the oven. The table set with care. She brushed past it, barely noticing. When I saw her the next morning, her eyes carried a glow that had nothing to do with love, and everything to do with infatuation.
Jonathan, Margaret said softly, she's slipping. Can't you see it?
Yes, I could see it. But as a father, what could I do? If I pushed too hard, she would only run faster. If I stayed silent, I risked watching her sink deeper. Daniel played his part perfectly. He never attacked Michael directly. That would have made Sarah defensive. Instead, he contrasted himself subtly. Michael was dependable, yes, but predictable. Daniel was exciting, spontaneous, the kind of man who could make every dinner feel like an adventure. And slowly, Sarah began to believe that excitement mattered more than stability. The breaking point came when Daniel began giving her gifts. At first, they were small, a necklace, a watch, things Michael couldn't afford without months of saving. But then the gifts grew larger. The ultimate one was money, $300,000. He gave it to her not as love, but as leverage, as an apology meant to wedge itself between her and the family she was drifting from. Those dollars were meant for peace, meant to mend wounds. Instead, they became fuel for Sarah's pride. She didn't take them to Michael, didn't offer them back to us, her parents. No, she went straight to the dealership. And that's when the Porsche 911 entered her life, and everything began to unravel. I tried to speak with her. I told her money spent on status would never buy peace of mind. She brushed me off with the impatience of someone who thinks the world is finally hers to command.
Asterisk, she looked at you as if you were the one who didn't understand, Margaret recalled bitterly. As if hard work and sacrifice were outdated ideas.
Sarah drove that car through Denver streets like it was proof of her worth. But to me, it was proof only of how far she had drifted. The seeds had been planted, and I knew what would come next. But even knowing I could not stop it, sometimes watching your child make a mistake is worse than making one yourself, because you know where the road leads, and they refuse to believe it until it's too late.
Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which city you are from.
The Monday after that rooftop lunch, Denver woke to clear skies and that bright, mile-high glare that makes chrome look like water. By 9 a.m., my daughter had a wire confirmation on her phone, $300,000. For your parents, Aaron Blake had typed the night before, followed by a champagne emoji. And by 11:10, she was standing under a row of spotlights at a Cherry Creek showroom, grinning into a glass wall, as a sales rep peeled a satin cover off a racing yellow 911. She didn't call me. She didn't call Margaret. She didn't even call Mark. She called her college friend on FaceTime and said, "I'm done pretending to be small." I know the timestamp because Mark texted me from the UPG doc a little afternoon. "Did you see her story?" I didn't know what a story meant on that app. He sent a screenshot, my girl in a white blazer, sunglasses big as saucers, one heel tipped against that low, expensive door. The caption read, "When life finally matches the vision." No mention of us. No mention of returning what wasn't hers to keep. Mark got off early and drove straight to the showroom. He told me later he stood there long enough to watch them mount the temporary plates. "It's a beautiful machine," he said, "but all I kept seeing was your hands, John. Calluses, concrete, dust, and that caption. When she did swing by our place, in the late afternoon, sunlight pouring over the hood like honey, my neighbors came out the way people do when a marching band passes. Phones up, smiles wide. She gave a little rev and laughed. It hurt. I won't lie. It hurt in a primitive, father-bone way, like hearing your own last name pronounced wrong." Margaret wiped her hands on a dish towel and stepped on the porch, careful and steady.
"It's dazzling," she said, the words measured. "But why here first?"
"Because you should be proud," our daughter answered, sliding her sunglasses into her hair. "I'm tired of apologizing for wanting more, for choosing someone who dreams big." "You mean Aaron?" I said. She rolled her eyes like I'd said the weather wrong. "He believes in me. He believes I deserve a life that isn't." She looked past me at our siding, at my old ladder strapped to the truck. "Isn't stuck." I caught Margaret's breath beside me, a small intake like she'd stepped on a nail. The porch boards felt suddenly too narrow for the three of us. Mark pulled in a minute later in his dusty Accord. Uniform polo still tucked in, name badge clipped. He didn't slam his door. Mark never slams anything. He just walked over, looked at the car, then looked at the woman he'd married under a cottonwood tree at City Park with paper lanterns and potato salad. "How much?" he asked. She told him. She told him without flinching. She told him like it was a weather report. "That was for them," he said, nodding toward us. "That was an apology. You promised." "It's my decision," she answered, "and I'm making it. You could have at least." "What? Clear it with you?" She laughed. "You manage routes, Mark. You don't get to manage me." I saw it, the little wince he couldn't hide. He pressed his lips together, swallowed, lifted his chin. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then let me be clear, too. We can't afford a down payment now. We can't. We won't need your precious starter home if things go the way they should," she said. "Aaron's team is scaling a fund. This is positioning." I felt the world tilt, subtle but certain, like the moment you realize your ladder is on gravel. Positioning, I repeated. The word tasted like foil in my mouth. She offered to take us around the block. Margaret said no. Too much sun, too late in the day. I said I had to finish quoting a porch rebuild for a woman off Federal. She shrugged, dropped into that leather seat, and the engine did a sound I've only heard on television. She didn't wave when she turned the corner.
Jonathan, Margaret said softly once the sound thinned into the hum of traffic. She's chasing a feeling, not a life. Feelings don't stop when the tank's empty.
That night Mark came by alone. He sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad and 3 lines under the words, "Return the money." He was careful, organized. He always has been. He wanted to show me a plan. How they could afford to fix their leaky bathroom. How, if she returned the bulk and sold the car, they could still get back on track within a year. He was trying to respect her while protecting our family and not losing his mind. It was the kind of math you do when you love someone who isn't keeping promises. He reached for the phone twice and didn't call. She says I'm limited, he told me, almost smiling at the wrongness of it, as if showing up and staying isn't the biggest thing a person can do. We kept the porch light on until after midnight. The 911 never pulled back into our street. The next week was louder than any storm. There were rooftop cocktails in Rhino, a tasting menu she posted at a place with a month-long wait list, a mountain drive with the moonroof open, the city glittering behind her like a jewelry case. There was also a missed car payment on the Accord and a second notice on Mark's student loan. He didn't tell her. He didn't want to poison the mood, he said. I built 2 decks that week in Athmar Park and a ramp for a retiree off Sheridan who kept saying, "I hate to be a burden." I kept my phone face down and my mouth shut. Pride can be as loud as shame if you let it. Sunday dinner came. Pot roast. The way Margaret makes it when the Broncos are on and she's feeling generous with time. Our daughter arrived 40 minutes late, kissed her mother's cheek, and never took the sunglasses off. She placed the keys on the counter. Key fob heavier than any tool I own. "Let's talk grown-up," she announced, as if we'd all been speaking in crayons. About opportunity, not guilt. I wanted to tell her I knew plenty about grown-up, about hauling trusses in sleet, about filing taxes on jobs where the checks cleared late, about holding your wife's hand at 2 a.m. while the baby won't stop crying and the heater clicks in a tired way you don't like. Instead, I said, "Sit, eat." We tried to, but dinner turned into a budget meeting no one had called. Mark brought up health insurance. She waved him off. I mentioned taxes on gifts above the annual exclusion. She smirked. Aaron's CPA has already handled it. Margaret asked, only once, what success looked like 5 years from now, not 5 minutes. Our girl answered with a floor-to-ceiling view and a flight status screen.
She looked at you like you were the one holding her back, Margaret told me later while we washed dishes, steam fogging the window. As if steadiness were small.
When the plates were dry and Mark had driven home alone, I stood in the doorway of our spare room and stared at the bedspread Margaret's mother quilted the winter of '86. Blue squares, steady hands, care stitched into cloth. I don't know exactly when a decision becomes a fall. Maybe it's the second the keys change hands. Maybe it's the first night you sleep with them on the nightstand and decide you like to wait. Maybe it's the moment you pass your own street and don't turn in because you want one more loop, one more look at your reflection in a window you don't pay for. But I knew, standing in that doorway, the house quiet, Denver lights soft through the blinds, that the road ahead wasn't paved with leather and glass. It was paved with the kind of choices you can't buff out.
Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which city you are from.
By late September, the leaves along Spear Boulevard had started to turn, yellow edges curling like they knew what was coming. Denver has that way of looking perfect in early fall. Sunny skies, crisp mornings, the Rockies sharp against the horizon. It's a season that tricks you into thinking everything's steady. For Sarah, it was more fuel, more rooftop photos, more dinner tabs that didn't include Mark's name, more spins down I-25 with music, so loud the license plates rattled. Aaron wasn't in the passenger seat often. He was closing deals or meeting with investors, but his shadow was in every mile. Mark told me once, standing at our fence after work, It's like living next to fire. Beautiful. But you're never sure when the wind will shift. He kept trying to stay close, to remind her that bills weren't optional, that money meant responsibility, not just gloss. She laughed him off, and every time she did, I saw another thread snap. Then came that Sunday. She had brunch plans downtown, some influencer event. She rolled up in that Porsche, wheels polished, hair catching light like copper wire. She hugged Margaret quick, barely listening when her mother asked if she'd eaten enough. By afternoon, the call came. It wasn't Sarah on the line, it was a hospital. Single vehicle collision, they said, near Alameda and Logan. Stable, but injuries. When we arrived, the car was already a headline. Photos online showed it spun against a median, front crumpled like paper, airbags out. People called it tragic, glamorous, wasteful, all in the same sentence. I only saw the bent frame of $300,000 turned into a warning. Inside, she looked small. Bandaged arm, bruises across her collarbone. Her face was pale and her voice trembled, but her first words weren't, "I'm sorry." They were, "It wasn't my fault." I stood there, jaw locked, until Margaret placed her hand on my arm.
"She's alive," she whispered, "and that's the only thing that matters right now."
The doctor explained. A long road to recovery, therapy, maybe surgery if the fractures didn't heal right. "She'll need patience," he said. I wanted to laugh. Patience had been traded for horsepower weeks ago. Mark came, too. He looked like a man who'd been carrying 2 lives on his shoulders and suddenly dropped both. He asked about costs, insurance, rehab. She turned away, muttering that Aaron would handle it. But Aaron never came. Not to the ER, not to the follow-ups, not when the first bills arrived, heavy as bricks. His texts dried up in polite excuses. Meetings, travel, pressure. Pressure so heavy it couldn't make room for a woman with crutches. At night, Margaret sat by Sarah's bed, brushing her hair back, humming the lullabies she used to sing.
"She still looks like our little girl when her eyes are closed," she said softly one evening. "But when she opens them, I see the storm she's caught in."
I try to hold my tongue, but bitterness is a river that always finds cracks. I wanted to say, "We warned you. We begged you." Instead, I fixed the railing on our porch, made soup, paid bills. Love can look like silence, too. Weeks passed. Therapy was slow, each session draining her spirit. She sold the Porsche, but not for what it had cost. The money vanished into hospital fees, specialist visits, painkillers. The gleam of wealth faded into the gray of waiting rooms. On, holding the level for me while I lag-bolted the ledger board. Right now, she can barely name the day that night she broke. She sat in our kitchen, tears streaking down her face, hands trembling around a bill she couldn't cover. "He's gone," she admitted. "Aaron's gone." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw it. The moment fantasy surrendered to reality. Margaret touched her shoulder gently.
"It's not the end, sweetheart," she said. "But it is the truth."
I didn't speak. I only looked at my daughter, the same girl who used to ride her bike down this street, who'd once painted "Happy Birthday, Dad" on poster board with crooked letters. The same girl who thought $300,000 was freedom, only to learn it was a chain. And in that silence, I knew we weren't at the end of the story. We were only at the point where everything she'd chosen came back to collect its due. Hospitals have a way of converting minutes into money. By the time Denver Health let Sarah go, a folder thick as a phone book rode home on her lap. Discharge notes, physical therapy schedules in Aurora, a payment plan that read like a second mortgage. The Porsche, her bright, brand new 911, was a crushed toy in a tow yard off I-70, totaled, stamped across a sheet like a verdict. Insurance would cover a sliver after depreciation and deductibles. The rest was a stack of numbers that did not care about tears. I spent the first weekend building a ramp. I poured concrete on sites from Commerce City to Castle Rock. So measuring slope and setting posts felt like a language I still spoke fluently. Sarah watched from a patio chair, hoodie in July, eyes on her hands. She didn't talk about the car. She didn't talk about a man from a Mercanex either. The one 10 years older who'd hand her the 300 grand to make things right with your folks. He vanished the second the airbags did. Broker's phone straight to voicemail. Emails bouncing back. His LinkedIn a clean suit with no conscience.
Let her name it when she can, your mother said quietly, holding the level for me while I light-bolted the ledger board. Right now, she can barely name the day.
Bills multiplied. Physical therapy. Neuro consults. A second opinion up in Anschutz. Uber rides when I was at work, and her legs wouldn't. The salvage check for the Porsche came. Looked big, looked promising, then disappeared into hospital codes and patient responsibility columns. We kept receipts in a handled box on the kitchen counter. The box got heavy. I caught myself pacing the hall at 3 a.m., the way I used when she was a colicky baby. Except now she wasn't crying, just staring at the ceiling, lips moving over a prayer or a math problem only she could see. One afternoon, I turned the mailbox key and found 3 envelopes stacked like a threat. PT past due, imaging past due, a final notice in red from provider none of us remembered meeting. She tried to fix it the way she'd broken it. Fast. Sold handbags, then a watch from a client Christmas bonus. Listed shoes that cost more than a month's groceries. It was a quiet garage sale in the back of her phone, and it bought only weeks. The apology money was gone twice over, once on a car, then on her body. Every dollar a lesson too late. I knew a man at UPG who said Ethan, the husband, was still there, still clocking hours in the delivery division as a shift manager, showing up, doing the unglamorous work. I didn't call him. Pride's a fragile thing, and marriages are puzzles best solved by the two trapped inside. Still, I wondered whether he knew about the ramp, the bills, the empty passenger seat on her follow-up days. The message from a Mercanex finally came, short as a shrug. This is more than I can handle. I'm sorry. No name at the end. No offer. Just a digital door closing. Sarah read it once and set the phone face down on the table. She didn't touch it again that day. She looked smaller in our kitchen, like the cabinets had grown. That night, your mother found her in the hallway between our room and the laundry. She wasn't crying, just stuck in that narrow space like a deer in a fence.
It's not the end, sweetheart, she whispered, bending to touch Sarah's hair. But it is the truth.
We called a family meeting the way working people do. No speeches, just chairs pulled close and coffee poured. I brought the handle box. Your mother brought the folder. Sarah brought her silence. I'm not going to say we told you. I began because that sentence never helps. What I'm going to say is this. Denver's killing you. The bills, the noise, the ghosts. You need a place to heal where status can't find you. She stared at the ring she still wore, twisting it 3 times and letting it go. I can't stay here forever, she said. I've already taken too much. That's the thing, I answered. You can't stay and you can't keep running. There's another option. Your mother slid a key onto the table. Brass, old-fashioned, a little tarnished at the edges. The kind locksmiths don't make much anymore. The old house in Prowers County, I said. Your grandma's place, empty since we cleaned it after the funeral. Roof's good. Well, pump is temperamental, but fixable. There's quiet. There's space. She blinked. 2 buttes. 2 buttes, I confirmed. Population you can count before your coffee cools. A library that still stamps due dates by hand. If you need work for your mind, you can ask the librarian for hours. If you need work for your hands, there's always something that needs painting or patching. We'll get you there. We'll set the basics. But there are terms. I looked at the handle box, then back at my daughter. No more big purchases. No more secret accounts. No more chasing people who run faster than your good sense. You live within what that little town can give you, and you give back what you can. Her throat worked around the next sentence. And Ethan, I didn't soften it. He made his decision. Maybe one day he wants to talk like adults. Maybe he doesn't. Either way, this plan isn't about him. She swallowed. And the man from a Mercanex, I said. He showed you who he is. Believe him. Silence stretched. The refrigerator hummed. A car climbed Downing, a distant siren on Spear. Life in Denver performing its usual never-ending play. In our kitchen, a different scene. 3 people, 1 key, a map on a spiral notebook.
We'll get the pantry set, your mother added softly. Sheets washed. I'll send you with my soup pot and the good skillet, the heavy one.
She reached across the table and touched Sarah's hand. And I'll drive out on Fridays till you tell me to stop. We made lists. Utilities in a town where the clerk still knows your name without asking. A volunteer form for the Two Buttes Library. We can always use help with the children's corner and Saturdays. The director had told me over the phone, her voice bright with the kind of hope only small towns keep alive without embarrassment. A hardware run for paint, outlet covers, a new gasket for the pump. I sketched a ramp on a napkin out of muscle memory and wrote lattice skirt in the margin. On moving day, Denver was all sky. We loaded the pickup with boxes labeled kitchen, essential, linens, books, keep, and a small stack marked maybe. Sarah wore a plain gray sweater and jeans, the kind of clothes no one photographs. Pride and shame had finally called a truce on her face. What replaced them looked a lot like resolve. Passing Limon, I watched her in the side mirror. The closer we got open country, the less her shoulders curled forward. By the Hugo exit, she was naming windmills and clouds. By Eads, she had the notebook open, writing groceries, trash day, meet librarian, ask about hours. We turned south where the plains widened into something the city once taught her to ignore. 2 buttes rose out of the earth like forgotten knuckles. The house sat where it always had, stubborn and square, the porch sagging just enough to say, fix me, the cottonwood waving at nobody in particular. I killed the engine. The silence arrived like a blessing. We carried in the boxes. The key turned with a little grit, and then gave, the door opening to that familiar smell of dust and soap that old places were like perfume. Your mother walked through each room like she was checking on sleeping children. I set the handle box on the counter, bills and all, a reminder that even Grace collects interest. That evening, after the bed was made and the ramp measured and the pilot light coaxed into steady flame, we sat on the porch and watched the horizon change colors without anyone narrating on the phone. Coyotes sang somewhere we couldn't see. A grain truck groaned by and then didn't. Stars came on like a promise. Sarah cleared her throat. I'll go to the library in the morning, she said, not asking, just deciding. I'll ask where they need help. Good, I told her. Start with books. Build from there. And call me at 9, your mother added with a small smile. Every night, even if you've got nothing to say. She nodded. The porch boards clicked under our boots. The house breathed. Out here, you can hear that if you listen. Denver felt far, not just in miles. The next day, she walked through the doors of the Two Buttes Library with the careful bravery of someone joining the human race again. We watched from the truck until the librarian's hands lifted in welcome, and Sarah's shoulders dropped that inch I'd been waiting to see. Then I put the pickup in gear. On the drive back, your mother looked out at the prairie and said what I'd been thinking.
We didn't save her. We just gave her a place where saving is possible.
I reached over and squeezed her hand on the console, the way men who work with their hands say amen. Denver would keep spinning. Deliveries, schedules, foremen yelling against the wind, the familiar music of our lives. Two Buttes would teach a different tempo. Between the two, a girl had a chance to learn the quiet skill of starting over without asking the noise for permission. Two Buttes is the kind of place where news spreads quicker than weather. By the second week, folks at the diner already knew that Sarah was the Denver girl who came home hurt. They said it kindly, like they were saving her the trouble of explaining. Small towns have a way of folding strangers into their quilt, if you let them. The librarian, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Collins, set a chair near the front desk and told Sarah, "Stamp cards, show what you can reach, and don't you worry about what you can't." That was Grace in a cardigan. The first night she called us in the little house, her voice cracked like old wood. "It's so quiet," she said. "I can hear the fridge from the bedroom." I told her that was how silence sounded once you survived the city. She didn't laugh, but she stayed on the line for half an hour, saying nothing, which was still better than hanging up.
I'll call you every morning too, your mother promised, her voice warm through the receiver. So you don't feel like the world forgot you while you sleep.
Sarah learned the rhythm of 2 Buttes quicker than I expected. Monday, the bookmobile left for farm roads. Tuesday, the quilting group filled the reading room with chatter. Friday, the kids stormed in after school like tumbleweeds with sneakers. She shelved, she stamped, she read to toddlers in a voice softer than I'd heard from her in years. Every paycheck was small, but it was honest, and that mattered more than numbers ever had. Still, she fought ghosts. Nights were hard. Pain in her legs came sharp, uninvited. Dreams carried Ethan's face, or the crash, or the man who'd vanished. Once she called near midnight and whispered, "Dad, I don't know who I am anymore." I wanted to tell her who she was. Our girl, stubborn as brick, but I let her sit in that silence. People can't be handed identities like tools. They got to build them again with their own hands. By October, the cottonwoods turned yellow. Sarah painted the porch rails white. She sent us a photo, brush in hand, streak on her cheek, smile unsure but real. Denver storm had dulled. Prairie skies gave her back pieces of herself she thought were lost. She mailed a thank you note to the librarian, though she saw her every day. She baked cookies with a recipe from her grandmother's box. When a neighbor's boy broke his arm, she signed his library card valid until healed. That was her humor coming back.
She's finding her way, your mother said, folding the note Sarah had written. Not fast. Not neat. But she's walking, and that's enough.
Bills still arrived in our Denver mailbox, though smaller now. We covered what we could call collectors, spread payments thin as butter on toast. Sarah insisted on sending $50 a month from her library pay, a symbolic sum that spoke louder than the dollars themselves. She was trying, and we let her try. One evening, she surprised us with a story from the library. A kid asked why I walk funny, she said on speakerphone. Before, I would have snapped. This time, I told him, because I took a ride too fast, and the world taught me to slow down. He nodded like it made sense. Maybe it did. Winter in 2 Buttes met with smoke, thin snow, long horizons that didn't change much. Sarah kept calling, sometimes cheerful, sometimes weary. But the desperation that used to haunt her voice softened, like a wound knitting together under bandages. She wasn't healed, not yet, maybe not ever fully, but she was no longer running. And that, in our family, counted as progress worth naming. By spring, the winds on the plains carried a softer edge. The snow melted into muddy furrows behind the library, and the first lilacs bloomed along the fence by Sarah's house. I drove out one Saturday to check on the roof shingles. It was a long ride from Denver, 3 hours of open highway and fields that seemed to hold more sky than earth. When I pulled up, she was already outside sweeping the porch, steady on her feet, her limp noticeable but no longer defining. She waved, not the showy, careless wave of a girl racing to a party, but the quiet acknowledgement of someone grateful for company. The difference struck me harder than I expected. Inside the house, the walls smelled faintly of lemon oil and books. Stacks of returned volumes sat by the door, waiting for Monday. On the kitchen table was a notebook, lines filled with careful handwriting. Catalog notes, she explained, a little embarrassed. I like to keep track of what comes through. For the first time, I saw her anchor herself not in status or flash, but in order and routine. We sat with coffee. No sugar, no cream. Money was tight. Habits had changed. She told me about the children's hours she'd been running, how she improvised voices for story time. She said some parents lingered in the doorway, listening, laughing quietly as if they'd forgotten their own weight. I watched her face as she spoke. The glow was still there, but it was no longer lit by borrowed fire. It came from something she built herself, small but real. There was no mention of Aaron. His name had evaporated, like ink spilled and scrubbed from a page. Even Mark's name came sparingly, usually attached to a memory of what once was. She didn't ask after him directly, and I didn't volunteer. That was a bridge burned on both ends, and ashes don't carry footsteps. Still, I noticed a photo frame on her shelf. Not the Porsche, not the glittering dinners or rooftop nights. It was an old snapshot I'd almost forgotten. Our families at Christmas, her and Mark as teenagers, arms slung awkwardly around each other while the tree leaned slightly to the left. A moment before choices, before fractures. She hadn't thrown it away. She hadn't displayed it proudly either. It just sat there, witness to a life that could have been. I didn't ask why she kept it. Some questions are answered only by silence. When I left that evening, she pressed the book into my hand. It was nothing special, just a paperback from the discard pile. On the inside cover she'd written, "For Dad, thanks for not letting me stay lost." I didn't open it until I reached Denver. When I did, the words blurred, and I had to stop the truck by the roadside until my vision cleared. Back home, Margaret asked how Sarah was doing. I told her she was steady. That was all. Steady isn't a triumph song, but in our family it was enough. We had learned the hard way that steady beats spectacular when spectacular burns too bright. The debt collector is still called, though less often. Some accounts have been closed, others forgiven in pieces. We carried some weight. Sarah carried the rest. It was never about erasing the past. It was about living alongside it without being crushed. People in Denver still whispered when they remembered the girl with the Porsche. They'd say, shaking their heads. I let them talk. They hadn't seen her hands dusted with flour from baking bread for the quilting group. They hadn't heard the sound of her laughter when a toddler mispronounced giraffe. They hadn't felt the calm of sitting at a kitchen table where regret no longer screamed but hummed quietly like a distant train. Driving back from 2 Buttes one evening, I realized something. We hadn't forgiven everything, not fully. Maybe we never would. Wounds scar, but scars don't vanish. What we had given her was not full absolution, but shelter, a roof over her head, a place where she could learn how to be whole again on her own terms. And perhaps that was the truest form of love we could manage. Not pretending the past never happened, but offering her the chance to stand in the present without being alone. The plains stretched out on either side of the highway, endless, indifferent, yet somehow hopeful. I thought of her there, in that small library, stamping due dates, telling stories, folding her life back into something simpler, sturdier. I didn't smile. I didn't weep. I only drove, knowing that sometimes a quiet horizon is the closest thing to redemption we'll ever get.